The brain has many means of protection, the cranial meninges, the cerebrospinal fluid, the bones, and the blood-brain barrier. You might recall the spinal meninges, the outer dura mater, middle arachnoid mater, and inner pia mater. The spinal meninges are continuous with the cranial meninges. The dura mater has two fibrous layers. Mostly they're fused together, but in some areas, including the dural venous sinus, the layers are separated by a gap containing fluid and blood vessels. So the outer layer is the periosteal layer, and the inner layer is the meningeal layer. So if you look at this picture here, you can see the dura mater. Here's the outer periosteal dura, the inner meningeal dura, and inferior or deep to that is the arachnoid mater and the subarachnoid space. And then finally the innermost pia mater, which sticks to every surface of the brain by way of these astrocyte processes, and it extends into every fold and sulci of the brain. There are dural folds that stabilize and support the brain. The brain matter is quite tender and cannot rest on the hard surface of bone. There are three large dural folds, the falx cerebri, the tentorium cerebelli, and the falx cerebelli. There are also these large collecting veins. So you can see here the largest one is the superior sagittal sinus. And these are located in the dural folds. The falx cerebri is a dural fold between the hemispheres. Then tentorium cerebelli separates the cerebral hemisphere from the cerebellum, and the falx cerebelli separates the cerebral hemispheres along the mid-sagittal line. Again, these support and protect the brain. Cerebrospinal fluid has three functions. It supports the weight of the brain, it cushions the brain and spinal cord from trauma, and it's responsible for transporting nutrients and wastes into and out of the cerebrospinal fluid. It's produced by the choroid plexus, and the choroid plexus is in each ventricle, and it consists of ependymal cells. And cerebrospinal fluid will circulate from the choroid plexus through the ventricles into the central canal of the spinal cord. So here you can see this mid-sagittal view of the brain, the superior sagittal sinus. The red arrow indicates direction of cerebrospinal fluid flow. So it's produced up here, and it's going to travel. Cerebrospinal fluid is formed from capillaries, and materials, nutrients and waste will diffuse between the cerebrospinal fluid and the interstitial fluid of the central nervous system. So if you look here, we're inside the third ventricle, and the blue represents the cerebrospinal fluid of the third ventricle. These cells, the ependymal cells, form the choroid plexus. And you can see here a capillary, and here's another capillary as well. So nutrients are leaving the capillary, and wastes are entering the capillary from the choroid plexus, ependymal cells. Cerebrospinal fluid is then absorbed and goes back to circulation, to venous circulation, at these finger-like projections called arachnoid granulations. So remember the two layers of the dura mater, the innermost meningeal layer and the outermost periosteal layer. Well, these finger-like projections called arachnoid granulations dip into that, they penetrate the meningeal layer and dip into this space here, into the superior sagittal sinus, and the cerebrospinal fluid will drain off into the superior sagittal sinus and returning to the plasma. Where is cerebrospinal fluid reabsorbed into the bloodstream? Arachnoid granulations. In which space around the brain does CSF circulate? Subarachnoid space. Which membrane forms the falx cerebri, falx cerebelli, and tentorium cerebelli, and forms the walls of the sinuses on the brain surface? Dura mater. If the flow of CSF is blocked at the lateral and median apertures, where will the fluid accumulate? In the ventricles of the brain. What is the function of the choroid plexus? Produce CSF.